Part 2, Chapter 4. What comes in packs? No one wanted to move deeper. The forest ahead looked the same as it had moments before. Grey fog tangled in black branches, damp earth swallowing sound. Nothing visible except trees and the body cooling behind them. But the feeling had changed. The single infected man had been horror. The sound now moving through the woods felt like something larger. Not louder, just more. Breath layered over breath. Motion brushing against motion, the kind of presence animals sense before they run. Stephen heard it in the silence between heartbeats. More than one. Alden Crow spoke first, voice low and steady, the way men talk when fear must not be allowed to grow teeth. "We pull back," he said. "We do not chase blind into fog." Several men nodded too quickly, relief flickering across faces they tried to keep hard. Others looked ashamed of that relief. Hamilton didn't move at all, revolvers loose in his hands, eyes fixed on the trees, as if waiting for the forest itself to decide whether they were prey. Stephen kept listening, counting breaths that were not theirs. "It's spreading faster than one carrier," Stephen said quietly. Isaac looked at him, dread already forming. "You think there are more bitten?" "I think," Stephen replied, "we are late." The words settled like cold ash. No one argued. A branch snapped somewhere ahead. Every weapon lifted at once. Too fast, too tight, too frightened. For a moment nothing followed. Just fog drifting between trunks, slow and harmless looking, the kind of quiet that tricks men into lowering guns a second too soon. Stephen felt the instinct to shout hold rising in his throat. Then movement came from the left. Not one figure, three. They stumbled from the grey like broken puppets pulled by the same invisible wire, mouths wet with foam and blood, eyes wide and empty of anything human that might still listen. One wore the torn apron of a butcher, another still clutched a strip of cloth, wrapped uselessly around a bitten hand. The third was a boy no older than 16. Isaac made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Stephen felt something inside his chest try to fracture. The infected saw them and screamed. The sound tore through the trees, high and animal and full of pain that had nowhere left to live except inside violence. All three began to run at once, bodies jerking, limbs striking wrong angles, speed driven by madness instead of muscle. The men behind Stephen shouted in terror, formation collapsing before the first shot even fired. "Hold the line," Alden roared, but fear had already broken it. One hunter turned and ran. The boy reached him first. They went down together in the leaves, teeth flashing, hands clawing, the scream cut short into choking wet silence that no one there would ever forget. Hamilton fired twice in rapid succession, one infected dropping, the other spinning but not stopping, blood spraying in a dark arc across bark and fog. Stephen grabbed Isaac's shoulder and shoved him back. "Behind me!" The butcher crashed into another man, knocking him sideways, jaws snapping inches from his throat before a shaking rifle discharged point-blank into the infected skull. Bone and blood burst outward in a red mist that hung in the cold air like something painted there. The body collapsed, twitching, boots scraping uselessly against dirt that no longer cared. But the boy still fed. Isaac froze, horror rooting him in place as he watched teeth tear into a living face. The sound, God, the sound, was worse than the sight. Wet, desperate, human. Stephen moved before thought finished forming, snatching Hamilton's spare revolver from his belt. "I'm sorry," Stephen whispered. He fired once. The boy's skull snapped back, body going limp over the man beneath him. Silence slamming down so suddenly it rang in the ears. Smoke curled from the barrel in a thin grey ribbon that matched the fog, as if the forest itself were breathing out death. No one moved. No one spoke. Two men were dead. One bitten hunter from before. One mauled just now beneath a child's body. And three infected lay still among them, faces frozen in the final shape of suffering that had not been allowed to finish becoming something worse. The surviving hunters stared at the ground, at their hands, at Stephen, at nothing at all, each man searching for a place to put what he had just seen. Isaac began to shake. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that Stephen felt it through the air between them. "This is only the beginning," Stephen said, voice hollow with truth he wished he could lie about. Hamilton reloaded with mechanical calm, cylinder clicking shut like the closing of a coffin lid. Alden Crow looked deeper into the fog, eyes narrowing with the terrible understanding earned by long life. If 3 came together, Alden murmured, there will be more. From somewhere far ahead in the trees, a scream answered. Not the scream of the infected, the scream of the living. And it was not alone. Part 2, Chapter 5, Where the Sickness Sleeps. They followed the scream deeper into the trees because there was nothing else left to do. Turning back would not save the town. Waiting would not slow the spread. Every step forward felt like walking toward a truth none of them wanted to see. Boots sinking into wet soil darkened by rot and old leaves that never fully died. The fog thickened the farther they moved, swallowing distance, muting sound, until even breathing felt too loud for a place that seemed to listen. Stephen felt it before he saw it. The smell, not just decay, something fouler, sweeter, wrong. The scent of infection concentrated in one place, heavy in the air like sickness given shape. Isaac covered his mouth with shaking fingers. One of the hunters gagged quietly. Even Hamilton's expression tightened, revolvers lowering slightly as instinct warned him this was no ordinary trail of death. Then the trees opened. The clearing looked wounded, earth torn open in long gouges as if animals had fought there for days without rest. Bones scattered in pale fragments across mud turned nearly black. Torn clothing caught on branches, blood soaked so deeply into the ground it had become part of the soil itself. And at the center, movement. A shape rose slowly from the ruin, not fully man, not fully animal. Something swollen with disease, skin stretched tight and broken in places where infection had pushed too far, foam and blood spilling endlessly from a mouth that could no longer close. Its breathing came in violent jerks, each inhale a fight, each exhale a wet rattle that seemed to shake the clearing itself. Isaac whispered, voice barely air. God. Stephen understood at once. The source, the first carrier, the thing that had been biting the others. Rabies pushed beyond anything nature intended. The brain consumed, the body driven only by the final command of infection, spread. It stared at them with eyes that held no thought, only endless panic trapped inside flesh that refused to die quietly. Then it screamed. The sound shattered whatever courage remained. It charged without balance, without fear, without anything human left to hesitate. 2 hunters fired too soon, bullets tearing bark instead of bone. Hamilton stepped forward instead of back, arms steady, waiting for the single clean moment that mattered more than panic. The creature hit the first man before the second shot came. Teeth sank into a throat. Blood burst outward in a hot red wave that painted leaves and hands and faces in an instant no one would ever forget. The scream cut off into choking silence as the body collapsed, dragged halfway to the ground by a thing that fed without hunger, driven only by madness burning through ruined nerves. Stephen forced himself to see, not look away, because truth required witnesses. Now, he shouted. Hamilton fired once. The bullet struck the skull, but not deep enough. The creature jerked, staggered, then lunged again with impossible strength, claws tearing into another hunter's chest, ripping cloth and skin as if both meant nothing. Isaac pulled the wounded man back, hands already soaked in blood. He knew he could not stop. Alden Crow lifted his rifle with shaking arms, and prayed anyway. The final shot came from Stephen, not clean, not heroic, necessary. The revolver bucked hard in his grip, the sound cracking through the clearing like judgment. The bullet entered through the eye and ended what sickness had stolen, the body collapsing mid-lunge into sudden merciful stillness that felt louder than all the violence before it. Silence followed, real silence. No movement, no breath, no scream. Only wind touching leaves and the broken sounds of men trying not to cry. 3 more bodies lay still in the clearing, blood soaked into ground that had taken too much already. Isaac knelt beside one of the fallen hunters, hands trembling though he knew there was nothing left to save. Stephen lowered the gun slowly and felt the weight arrive. This was the beginning, he said quietly, and now it ends. No one argued, because they all felt it. The air had changed. The pressure lifted. The forest for the first time felt empty instead of waiting. They carried the dead back at dusk. Fewer men returned than had entered, boots dragged with exhaustion deeper than muscle. No one spoke of victory, not yet. Victory did not erase the faces left behind in the trees, but something else walked with them now, quiet and undeniable. Survival. The town saw it the moment they arrived. Blood on clothes, guns half empty. Eyes that had looked into something terrible and come back different. Word spread faster than fear had the night before. Doors opened, people gathered. Mothers counted the living, wives searched faces. Grief and relief tangled together until neither could be separated. And in the center of it, Stephen Woods stood. Alden Crow stepped forward before anyone else could speak. "This man," the elder said, voice carrying across the silent crowd, "walked into death and brought us back a future. He turned slowly so all could see Stephen clearly. He named the sickness, he taught us how to stop it, and he did not run when running would have been easy." The crowd listened, this time without shouting. "In the years I have left," Alden continued, "I will trust no other with the lives of this town." He lifted a trembling hand towards Stephen. "From this night forward, Stephen Woods stands as head physician of Folklore, keeper of our health, guardian against plague, and voice of reason when fear tries to rule us." Silence held for one breath. Then heads began to bow. Alden looked to Isaac. "And Isaac Tesla, who stood beside him in blood and truth, shall serve as his physician's hand and apprentice." Isaac's eyes widened, grief and honor colliding in the same moment. Alden turned to Sarah. "Sarah Escort, who did not flee the suffering, shall be nurse to this town and protector of the wounded." Finally, Alden faced Hamilton. The elder studied the gunslinger a long moment. "A town survives not only by healing, but by those willing to face darkness first." His voice hardened slightly. "Hamilton, you will stand as special agent of Folklore, defender where law fails and night grows teeth." Hamilton said nothing, but he nodded once. The crowd lowered their heads together, not in worship, in recognition, because something had changed forever in the space of a single day. The sickness had come, death had walked among them, and 4 strangers had stepped forward when no one else could. Legends rarely begin with glory, they begin with survival. That night, for the first time since the terror started, the town slept. Candles burned softer, doors stayed closed but not barred in panic. The wind carried only ordinary darknesses instead of screams. Peace did not feel joyful, only fragile. But fragile peace was still peace, and beneath the quiet, the future waited.